What was the hardest piece of news you've had to tell someone? I had to tell my spouse and children that my 26-year-old took his own life. After my parents split up, my dad moved us in with his mother. She was one of those grandmas who woke up every morning to get my siblings and I up for school. Because my dad left for work at 4 a.m. and worked 12-hour days usually. One day she didn't wake us up. Just as was coming out of my room, I saw my younger, 4 years, I was 17, coming out of her room. This year we just kind of looked at each other and had an oh shit moment. I went in to check on Grandma. She was cold, so I called 911 and then had to call Dad. That was hard, and because he worked about 30 minutes away. This was the 90s, so cell phones weren't that common yet. I had to call all the aunts and uncles too, and then dig out Grandma's DNR from where Dad told me it was and hand it to the EMTs that showed up. So it was definitely the 7 worst calls of my life so far. Tell my dad, who was in the hospital 2 weeks away from his own death, that his father had died. Dad hadn't yet accepted that he himself was dying, though my sister and I could see it. Grandpa had been in hospice for 2 months, so we all knew that his end was near. In the week between Grandpa's death and his funeral, Dad began to accept that he didn't have much time left. Dad made it to Grandpa's funeral, albeit via ambulance, wheelchair, and saw his extended family for the last time. That was a surreal experience for me, watching him say goodbye. Edit. Typo. I had to call my friend's girlfriend to let her know he'd been killed in an accident, and then share that news with his best friend on a pursuant call. Mom and her 4-year-old daughter were in a house fire. Mom had third-degree burns over 60% of her body. She was put in a medically induced coma. After extubating the mom a few days later, my roommate, a surgery resident, had to tell her that her daughter was brain dead. My daughter died from suicide at 20 years old. My mom was in her last hours in hospice. I had to tell her. It was the worst weekend in my life. 10 years later, I still struggle with it. I miss them both every day. Edit. She told me she would look for her. Telling my mom over the phone while she's in the hospital that I just found my dad in bed. Passed away. She was in so much denial that he had died. She tried to convince me that maybe he's just doped up on sleeping pills. I wished it were true, but I had already knew he was gone when I tried to move him. You're stiff as a board. Paramedics came in and confirmed he died. Mom was on the phone still and heard everything. I never knew heartbreak could have a sound until I heard my mom break down on the phone. I tried to keep my composure, but I ended up having to mute the phone call and let some tears out myself. This was almost 2 years ago. Edit. This is my first Reddit post. Thank you all for the condolences. And thank you so much for the platinum this year. Telling my sister that our dad's heart attack was indeed fatal. Tell my dad, who had dementia, my mother passed away from cancer. I had to tell my wife that our 8-year-old son had died in the night. He was on hospice and it was expected, but that was still hard. Then I had to phone my older children and tell them this year Thursday will mark 2 years. Professionally, I had to tell the parents of a 20-year-old basketball star that his drug use did not account for his unusual thoughts and behaviors, that he was, in fact, psychotic and likely schizophrenic.